There is a truth about love that many overlook. Too often we are taught that love is about sacrifice, about bending ourselves, about lowering who we are in order to be accepted. But in truth, the deepest bond is not born out of surrendering your essence. It is born out of standing in it. When you don't humble yourself just to be loved, you begin to attract the kind of connection that cannot be broken. For real love does not ask you to shrink. Real love does not demand you abandon yourself. Instead, it recognizes and responds to your wholeness. Let us explore how holding to your authentic self invites an unbreakable bond, one that endures not because you are diminished, but because you are fully alive within it. When you refuse to humble yourself for love, you send forth a message far more powerful than words could ever carry. This is who I am, and I will not pretend otherwise. Such a declaration is not merely an act of defiance. It is an act of integrity. It is the soul refusing to bend itself into the shapes demanded by fear, convenience, or insecurity. It is the moment when the individual declares that they will not fracture themselves in order to be accepted. And something extraordinary happens in that moment. Those who cannot meet you at your truth will fall away, and those who are destined to walk with you are drawn closer, almost magnetically. Human beings are like tuning forks. When struck, one will cause another of the same frequency to vibrate. We call this resonance. In relationships, it is no different. The tone you strike within yourself, the truth you embody, creates a vibration that others can feel. And if you are living authentically, you will attract those who carry the same resonance. If, however, you mute yourself, if you suppress your opinions, your dreams, your essence, simply to keep another comfortable, then you are no longer striking your own note. You are echoing theirs. And what comes of such imitation is never harmony, only dissonance. Consider how often people distort themselves for love. They change their laughter, soften their opinions, hide their ambitions, because they are afraid that to stand fully in themselves is to risk being left alone. Yet the tragedy is that in doing so, they create bonds that are hollow. These are fragile, fleeting connections, easily broken because they were never rooted in truth. One cannot expect permanence from a love that was built on pretense. There is a story of a woman who lived much of her life silencing her voice in order to preserve peace with her partner. She thought that by avoiding conflict, by agreeing to everything, she was protecting the relationship. But what she was really doing was erasing herself. Over time, she felt invisible, as though her very existence was slipping into the shadows of another's will. Eventually, the weight of her silence became unbearable. She began to speak her truth, to voice her opinions, to stand in her authenticity, and yes, the relationship ended. At first, she thought she had failed, but shortly afterward she met someone who looked at her not as a shadow, but as a whole being, someone who admired her strength, who cherished her honesty, who loved her not because she yielded, but because she stood firm. That bond, rooted in authenticity, has endured through years of storms and trials. And why? Because it was built on the soil of truth, not the sand of appeasement. Authenticity draws authenticity. When you show the world your real self, you invite others to do the same. When you are unafraid to reveal your inner world, the light and the shadow, you give others permission to stop hiding theirs. This is why the deepest friendships and the most enduring romances are those where both individuals can stand unveiled before one another. There is no need for masks, no endless labor to maintain illusions, no quiet resentment at having to play a role that does not fit. There is freedom in such love, and where there is freedom, there is durability. But to live this way requires courage, for there is always the risk of rejection. Many people fear that if they stop bending themselves, if they stop humbling themselves in love, they will be abandoned. And sometimes they will be, but abandonment by those who cannot love your true self is not a loss. It is a liberation. It clears the path for those who are truly meant to stand beside you. Imagine two trees growing side by side in a forest. If one tree bends unnaturally toward the other, it grows twisted and fragile. But when both trees grow upright, rooted in their own strength, their branches intertwine in a way that is both natural and enduring. The paradox of love is that the more we sacrifice our authenticity, the weaker the bond becomes. It may appear stable on the surface, quiet dinners, polite conversations, the absence of arguments, but beneath, the structure is rotting. A bond maintained by silence is not a bond at all. True love is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of truth. Two individuals, fully themselves, meeting in honesty. That is the ground where unbreakable love takes root. Think of it in terms of the psyche. When the conscious mind denies too much of the unconscious, when it represses desire, opinion, truth, what happens? The unconscious finds ways to erupt. It shows itself through dreams, through symptoms, through sudden outbursts. In relationships, the same principle applies. When you suppress your authenticity for too long, it will eventually emerge, often violently, shattering the illusion of harmony you worked so hard to preserve. By contrast, when you live authentically from the beginning, you do not need eruptions to restore balance. Your balance already exists. Even research in psychology confirms this truth. Studies consistently show that individuals with higher self-esteem attract partners who are more stable, more supportive, and more likely to remain committed over time. Why? Because self-respect creates respect in return. To respect oneself enough not to humble one's essence for another is to establish the kind of foundation upon which respect from the outside world can rest. And respect, once present, transforms love into something enduring. Love rooted in authenticity is not fragile. It does not crack under the weight of truth. It does not collapse when faced with honesty. On the contrary, truth strengthens it. Just as fire tempers steel, so too does honesty temper the bond between two souls. And once tempered, it is not easily broken. If you look at couples who have endured not merely years, but decades together, you will see a pattern. They did not last because one person endlessly yielded to the other. They lasted because each stood firm in their individuality, and yet they chose, again and again, to meet in love. They argued, yes. They disagreed, yes. But beneath those storms was the unshakable root of authenticity. They did not humble themselves to the point of invisibility. They remained whole, and thus they could offer themselves wholly. So authenticity is not simply about being yourself. It is about daring to live without apology. It is about holding your ground when everything tempts you to yield for the sake of acceptance. It is about saying, "This is my truth, and if you love me, you must love me here." For anything less than that is not love. It is performance. And so, the path to an unbreakable bond begins not with pleasing another, but with standing firm in yourself. For when you strike your true note, when your soul vibrates in its natural frequency, those who are meant for you will hear it. They will resonate with it. They will draw near, not because you bent to meet them, but because you dared to stand tall. And that bond, born of truth and strengthened by authenticity, is not the kind that time erodes or silence suffocates. It is a bond that endures because it is real. It is a love that cannot be broken because it was never built on illusions in the first place. Love that endures, love that withstands the erosion of time and the tempests of human frailty. is always built upon respect. Respect is the soil from which devotion, loyalty, and trust grow. Without it, affection withers into dependency, passion burns itself out into resentment, and attachment becomes a cage rather than a bond. But respect does not descend upon us as a gift from others. It cannot be begged, demanded, or negotiated into being. Respect is first rooted in the way we regard ourselves. To be respected by another, you must first stand in the unwavering dignity of self-respect. Yet how often do we betray this truth? How often do we humble ourselves for love, mistaking submission for security, silence for peace, or self-erasure for loyalty? Each time you lower your worth for the comfort of another, you plant in their mind the seed of your dispensability. You are, in that moment, teaching them that it is permissible to undervalue you, and once that permission is given, it becomes the unspoken contract of the relationship. The human psyche adapts quickly to patterns. If you establish that your needs, your voice, your boundaries are negotiable, the other will unconsciously assume they are unimportant. Think of the dynamics of work, for they often mirror the unspoken laws of intimacy. An employee who consistently says yes to extra hours, who takes on burdens without recognition, who absorbs injustice without protest, is not rewarded with admiration. They are not promoted for their self-sacrifice. More often, they are exploited. The system learns that this is the one who will not resist, the one who can be drained without consequence. Respect is rarely given to those who barter away their dignity, because respect cannot survive in the absence of boundaries. Relationships are no different. When you silence yourself endlessly in order to maintain the fragile peace of love, you are not preserving the bond, you are corroding it. You are making yourself invisible in the very place where you long to be most deeply seen. Boundaries are not prisons. They are not walls erected to keep intimacy away. They are the pillars that uphold it. A house without pillars collapses under its own weight, and love without boundaries does the same. When you say, "This is what I can accept, and this is what I cannot," you are not pushing love away. You are building a structure strong enough to hold it. Respect thrives within the lines of clear boundaries, for they signal to the other person that you regard yourself as someone worthy of care, and therefore they must regard you in the same way. Consider the opposite, the person who constantly bends, who constantly yields, who has erased their limits for the sake of being loved. At first, this self-denial may be mistaken for devotion. The partner may even feel flattered by such submission. But over time, what happens? The bond turns hollow. Resentment grows in the one who has sacrificed too much, and indifference grows in the one who has been given too much power. The relationship becomes unequal, and inequality is the breeding ground of contempt. Respect cannot live where contempt takes root, and once respect dies, love begins to suffocate. But when both individuals stand firmly in their worth, something very different unfolds. Neither needs to dominate, neither needs to yield into invisibility, because each recognizes the sacredness of the other's humanity. To look at another and say, "I will not diminish myself for you," is simultaneously to say, "And I will not ask you to diminish yourself for me." It is a mutual recognition of dignity, and in this recognition, love is no longer a possession, no longer a bargain of needs, but a sacred encounter between equals. There are countless examples of this truth. Think of marriages that endure for decades not because one person silenced themselves, but because both partners held their ground. They respected their own individuality, their own dreams, their own voice, and in turn they respected the individuality of their partner. They argued, they disagreed, they collided, but beneath the conflict was the solid bedrock of mutual respect. Arguments without respect tear people apart. Arguments with respect bind them closer, for they remind both partners that their voices matter, their truths matter, their existence matters. Respect rooted in self-respect is also the only safeguard against love becoming manipulation. If you do not respect yourself, you will tolerate disrespect. If you tolerate disrespect, you will rationalize mistreatment. And if you rationalize mistreatment, you will eventually confuse suffering with devotion. But suffering is not devotion. To endure endless disrespect in the name of love is not a testament to strength. It is a betrayal of the self. Real love does not require you to endure diminishment. It invites you to stand tall in your dignity. This principle reaches even into the unconscious. If you suppress your worth, if you treat yourself as small, the unconscious absorbs this pattern and reflects it in your relationships. You will find yourself drawn to partners who mirror your lack of self-respect, partners who see in you what you secretly believe about yourself. It is not fate nor curse, but the psyche's relentless drive for coherence. It aligns the outer world with the inner belief. If you wish for others to respect you, you must first restore that respect within. Only then does the psyche attract partners who reflect that renewed dignity. And yet, many people fear that boundaries will drive love away. They believe that if they demand respect, they will lose affection. But affection without respect is not love. It is attachment, it is dependency, it is hunger masquerading as intimacy. The love that departs because you stand in your worth is not love you needed to keep. The love that remains when you are fully yourself, when you no longer humble your dignity, that is the love worth keeping. There is a quiet strength in those who embody self-respect. They do not need to shout, they do not need to demand, they do not need to manipulate. Their very presence carries the weight of dignity. Others feel it, even if unconsciously. Just as one instinctively lowers their voice in a cathedral, people instinctively adjust themselves in the presence of someone who respects themselves deeply. It is not fear that creates this adjustment, but reverence. When you treat yourself as sacred, you train others to do the same, and here lies the paradox. The more you demand respect for yourself, not through aggression, but through quiet firmness, the more love deepens. For love without respect is fragile, but love infused with respect is unbreakable. Respect steadies passion, tempers desire, and transforms fleeting attraction into lasting devotion. It gives love its spine, its structure, its dignity. Passion may ignite the fire of love, but respect is the vessel that keeps it burning. So when you refuse to humble yourself for love, when you refuse to diminish your worth for the comfort of another, you are not pushing love away. You are creating the only environment in which it can truly thrive. You are establishing that you are not a shadow to be stepped over, not a vessel to be emptied, but a being of equal worth. And when two such beings meet, when two souls both rooted in self-respect turn toward one another, the bond that forms is not easily broken, for it is woven not merely of passion nor of desire, but of reverence. And reverence, once born, does not die easily. It endures because it is grounded in the recognition of something sacred. We are often taught to believe that strength is intimidating, that independence drives others away, that to be fully ourselves in our convictions and desires is to risk being left behind. This fear runs deep in the human psyche, for the unconscious mind associates belonging with survival. To stand fully in our power feels dangerous, as though the moment we show our true magnitude, others will scatter. And so many people dim their light, mute their voice, or soften their will, believing that by hiding their strength they will secure companionship. Yet the truth is precisely the opposite. Strength, when expressed with integrity, does not repel love. It attracts it. Strength does not dissolve commitment. It inspires it. Love that is rooted in fear is fragile. When we humble ourselves into dependency, when we show up as incomplete and desperate for validation, the kind of love we draw is not a devotion to who we are, but a temporary response to what we lack. Such love clings when it feels needed but evaporates when our weaknesses no longer serve the other's sense of power. But when you show up as strong, when you stand firm in who you are without begging for affection or approval, you invite not pity but admiration. You invite not conditional attachment but enduring commitment. Social psychology has long revealed what ancient wisdom already knew. Human beings are drawn to strength not as domination, but as a signal of stability. A person who respects themselves, who carries confidence without arrogance, becomes magnetic because they do not seek to consume others. They are not desperate, they are not empty, they are not seeking to be filled. They are whole. And wholeness is what attracts others most deeply, because in the presence of wholeness, we feel safer, more grounded, more able to trust. Think of the moments in life when you have admired someone most. Was it when they silenced themselves, when they hid their abilities, when they humbled themselves into smallness? Or was it when they stood quietly but firmly in their strength, when they spoke truth with clarity, when they carried themselves with dignity, when they revealed a self that could not be diminished? Admiration always flows toward strength, and admiration is one of the deepest roots of commitment. A person may be desired for their beauty, sought for their charm, or pursued for their comfort, but they are only truly committed to when they are respected. And respect always begins with strength. It is important, however, to distinguish strength from control. Strength is not the attempt to dominate another, nor the insistence on always being right. True strength is the capacity to remain rooted in oneself without wavering, even in the presence of opposition. It is the power to speak your truth without silencing another's. It is the ability to hold steady in your convictions while leaving space for someone else's truth to exist beside your own. This form of strength does not suffocate intimacy, it makes it possible. For what is more reassuring in love than the presence of someone who knows themselves deeply, who does not falter with every storm, who does not cling in desperation, but connects in freedom? Consider the couples who have endured across decades. Their bonds do not survive because one person endlessly yielded to the other. No, they survive because both individuals respected and admired the other's strength. They saw in one another not fragility to be pitied, but resilience to be honored. Their love became not an exchange of weakness for comfort, but a union of two strong spirits walking together. They argued, they disagreed, they even hurt one another at times. But beneath the turbulence of their shared life was the unshakable foundation of mutual respect born from strength. And so they did not fall apart at the first sign of difficulty. They leaned on one another, not out of desperation, but out of trust. There is a story of a man who once confessed that he fell in love with his wife not when she was most tender, not when she was most accommodating, but when she stood her ground against him. In the early days of their relationship, he expected her to agree with him, to bend as others had bent before, but she did not. She challenged him. She refused to silence her truth. At first it frustrated him, but soon he realized something deeper. He respected her, and that respect grew into a love that lasted decades. He said, "I knew then that I could build a life with her, because I knew she was strong enough to stand with me, not behind me." This is the paradox of love. We fear that our strength will drive people away, but it is precisely our strength that makes others want to stay. The commitment that endures is not born from weakness, but from admiration. To love someone for their weakness is to bind yourself to an illusion, for weakness will always change with time, but to love someone for their strength is to love what is enduring within them. That is why strength attracts commitment, because it signals permanence, stability, a ground upon which something lasting can be built. Even in mythology, we see this truth reflected. Heroes are not admired because they begged for love or hid their power. They are remembered because they stood in their strength, even at great risk, and what draws others to them is not the absence of vulnerability, but the courage to face life without shrinking. In love, too, we become most magnetic when we embody this archetype, not the one who pleads to be chosen, but the one who stands ready to walk with another, whole in themselves. Strength also liberates love from the chains of dependency. A relationship where one person is strong and the other perpetually weak creates imbalance, and imbalance breeds resentment. But when both partners stand in their own strength, the relationship becomes a choice renewed each day, not a cage of necessity. There is no clinging out of fear, no manipulation born of insecurity. Instead, there is freedom, and freedom deepens commitment because what is freely chosen is always more enduring than what is coerced. Research in attachment theory echoes this truth. Securely attached individuals, those who are confident in themselves and comfortable with intimacy, form the most stable and lasting bonds. They are not consumed by jealousy, nor crippled by insecurity, nor suffocated by fear of abandonment. Instead, they love from a place of strength, and in doing so, they inspire strength in their partners. The bond becomes mutual reinforcement rather than mutual depletion. This is why strength, far from driving people away, draws the right people nearer. It filters out those who seek only to dominate or exploit, for they cannot tolerate someone who will not bend, but it magnetizes those who are capable of real love, for real love longs for an equal. And in the presence of equals, commitment thrives not as a duty, not as a burden, but as a natural response to admiration and respect. So when you stand fully in your independence, when you express your desires without shame, when you carry your convictions with grace, you may lose those who were only interested in a shadow of you. But you will gain the one who sees you in your fullness and says, "Yes, I will walk beside this strength." And that, in the end, is the only commitment worth having. When you refuse to humble yourself for love, when you dare to stand without disguise, something essential happens. You ensure that love begins with truth, and truth, unlike illusion, does not shatter under pressure. It does not disintegrate when the storms of life come crashing in. Truth has the gravity of the eternal, while illusion has only the fragility of the temporary. A relationship born in illusion may dazzle at first, like a mirage shimmering in the desert, but eventually the thirst for reality exposes its emptiness. Only that which is grounded in truth can endure the harsh desert sun, the rains of difficulty, and the winds of time. Think of how often people construct their love upon facades. They pretend to like what they do not like. They silence needs that ache within them. They bend their dreams until they no longer resemble the soul's calling. They do this because they fear rejection, because they believe that truth will drive love away. But such love is a castle built on sand. It may look beautiful, it may hold for a season, but the tide always returns. And when it does, illusion collapses, because illusion cannot bear weight. Only truth can. The human psyche longs to be known. Beneath every pretense, beneath every carefully crafted persona, there is a hunger. See me as I am, and still choose me. This is why truth is the cornerstone of unbreakable love. When two people stand unveiled before each other, no longer performing roles, no longer hiding shadows, and still whisper, "Yes, I choose you," then what is built cannot easily be broken. It is not dependent on masks, and therefore it does not collapse when masks fall away. I once heard the story of a couple who reached the hardest moment of their marriage when one partner confessed a deep and gnawing fear of inadequacy. For years they had hidden this fear, pretending to be unshakably confident because they thought weakness would make them unlovable. But the pretense became too heavy. At last they spoke the truth aloud. "I am afraid I am not enough." They braced for rejection, expecting the bond to fracture. Instead, their partner responded, "I don't love you because you're perfect. I love you because you're real." That single moment of truth became a thread stronger than steel, one that carried them through trials for years afterward. Their love deepened, not because the illusion was preserved, but because the illusion was destroyed. This is the paradox of truth in love. We fear that truth will end what we most wish to preserve, but in reality it is illusion that ends it. It is hiding, pretending, silencing that robs love of breath until it suffocates. Truth, though it may be painful, though it may expose our fears and inadequacies, gives love oxygen. It allows the other to know us, and only what is known can truly be loved. To be loved for a mask is to never be loved at all. To be loved for who we really are is to be seen, and to be seen is to be free. Psychology tells us that the unconscious always pushes toward expression. What is hidden will find its way into the open. If we suppress our needs, they emerge as resentment. If we bury our fears, they erupt as anger or distance. If we silence our dreams, they return as bitterness. Illusions do not remain buried, they rot, and the stench leaks into the relationship. But truth, when spoken, purifies. It may hurt in the moment, it may destabilize comfort, but it clears the air, it opens the window, it brings light. And in that light, love breathes again. Think also of how children relate to parents. A child who hides their struggles to preserve approval creates a fragile bond. But a child who dares to speak their fears, and a parent who dares to receive them without judgment, builds a connection that lasts. The same principle applies to lovers. If love requires us to hide, then love itself becomes the prison. But if love makes space for truth, then love itself becomes the liberation. The unbreakable bond is not one where two people never fail each other, never wound each other, never fall short. Such a thing does not exist. The unbreakable bond is the one where truth can always return, where confession is met not with destruction, but with renewal. When the truth of failure is admitted, when the truth of fear is shared, when the truth of desire is spoken, the relationship is strengthened, not weakened. It is like fire to gold. It burns away the dross, but what is real only shines brighter. There is a quiet nobility in choosing truth over comfort. Comfort whispers, "Keep the peace," pretend everything is fine, but truth insists, "Show yourself even if it shakes the ground." And when both partners choose truth, they create a foundation that no storm can uproot. Arguments will come, difficulties will arise, seasons of distance may threaten the bond, but if truth remains, then the bond remains, for nothing can dissolve that which is real. Long-term couples who endure testify to this reality. They are not together because everything was easy. They are not together because they avoided conflict. They are together because again and again they faced truth. They admitted when they were wrong. They confessed when they were afraid. They spoke of their needs rather than burying them. They revealed their shadows rather than masking them. And each time, though it hurt, though it tested the bond, it ultimately deepened it. Because truth is the only material strong enough to weave love that lasts. And so, when you refuse to humble yourself, when you refuse to play small, to hide your needs, to bend your soul into silence. You are not making love harder to find. You are making it real. You are ensuring that when love comes, it is not a counterfeit that will crumble, but the genuine thing that can weather time. You are saying to the other, see me, not as you want me to be, but as I am. If you choose me here, then we can withstand anything. For what love truly longs for is not perfection, not performance, not illusion. What it longs for is reality, a partner who can stand before you in their wholeness, light and shadow, strength and fear, and still say, yes, I am here. That is the love that does not shatter. That is the love built on truth. When you no longer humble yourself for love, when you stop fragmenting pieces of who you are just to be accepted, something profound begins to unfold. You invite into your life a kind of love that is not shallow, not conditional, and not based on the performance of parts, but a love that embraces your entirety. This is not the love that only admires your gentleness, your sweetness, or your ability to give. It is the love that also honors your fire, your passion, your stubbornness, your individuality, even your shadows. And herein lies the deepest truth. True love does not demand that you cut yourself into acceptable pieces. It calls you to be whole. Most of us, at one time or another, have tried to hide parts of ourselves in order to be loved. We soften our words, silence our needs, or pretend to enjoy what we do not, all because we fear that our truth will drive someone away. It is as if we believe that love is a fragile thing, that it cannot handle the weight of authenticity. Yet what happens is the opposite. The more we edit ourselves, the weaker the bond becomes. We begin to live in a kind of quiet tension, always afraid of being too much or not enough. That tension eats away at connection, because deep down the soul knows when it is not being seen. An unbreakable bond, however, does not emerge from pretending. It comes from being witnessed fully. Think of two trees growing side by side. They do not bend unnaturally into each other to form a single trunk. Rather, they grow strong in their own roots, stretching toward the sky in their individuality. And yet, side by side, their branches intertwine, creating shelter, creating harmony. This is the picture of true love, not two halves desperately clinging to fill a void, but two wholes walking together. Consider the many long, lasting partnerships that withstand time and hardship. When you look closely, you do not find that one partner erased themselves for the other. Instead, you find a mutual recognition, a reverence for the full complexity of the other. In one story I once heard, a couple married for over 50 years was asked their secret. The husband answered, I never wanted her to be less of herself. I wanted to spend my life discovering more of her. What he meant was that their bond was not about comfort at the cost of truth. It was about growth, about allowing space for the other to unfold in their entirety. That is why their love endured. It was not a cage, it was freedom. The paradox is striking. We often think that to keep love safe, we must shrink, we must humble ourselves, we must avoid conflict by suppressing what is real. But in truth, the opposite is what protects love. When both people are free to bring their authentic selves into the relationship, there is nothing fragile to guard, no illusion to maintain. Love becomes resilient because it is built on the recognition of reality, not fantasy. Psychological studies on relationships support this. Research on authenticity shows that people who feel free to express their true selves in a relationship report higher satisfaction, greater trust, and deeper intimacy. Why? Because when you are not hiding, you can truly connect. You no longer fear that if the other person really knew you, they would leave. They already know you. They have already chosen you, not for a mask, but for the living, breathing, imperfect, magnificent whole that you are. This recognition of the whole self is especially important in moments of struggle. Life inevitably brings seasons of darkness, loss, illness, disappointment, failure. If love has only embraced the surface, if it has only clung to the easy parts, it cannot withstand these trials. But when love has rooted itself in truth, when both people have seen each other's shadows as well as their light, then hardship does not break the bond, it deepens it. You discover that you are not loved in spite of your flaws, but within them, through them, because of the courage it takes to reveal them. Think of the paradox again. By refusing to humble yourself, by refusing to erase your true nature, you create the safest possible space for love to thrive. Because there is nothing left to fear. The one who stands with you knows your storms as well as your calm, your fire as well as your gentleness, your doubts as well as your certainties. And still, they choose to walk beside you. That choice, made again and again in full awareness, is what makes love unbreakable. In the end, love that recognizes the whole self is love that liberates. It does not chain you to an image. It does not ask you to sacrifice your individuality at the altar of acceptance. Instead, it says, "Be who you are entirely, and let me be who I am entirely, and together let us walk." Two authentic souls meeting in freedom create a bond that neither time nor hardship can dissolve. It is not about possession, it is about recognition. It is not about illusion, it is about truth. And when love is built on this, when it sees you fully and asks for nothing less than your wholeness, then you have found something rare, something unbreakable, something eternal. So remember this, do not shrink for the love that requires you to shrink was never love at all. Hold to your wholeness, speak your truth, stand in your worth. For when you do, the bond you attract will not just last, it will be unbreakable.